Hello and welcome to Not Alone with Pride in Surrey. Remember, it costs nothing to be nice, so show some love and say no to online hate. Hate crime significantly hurts individuals, and during this already challenging and unprecedented time, it's the last thing anyone wants to be experiencing or witnessing. Together, we can put a stop to hate crime Surrey by simply reporting it. So please do visit our website for more information. Head over to prideinsurrey.org/stop hate. And remember, the Stop Hate Surrey app is available in all good app stores. Hello, I'm Stephen Ireland. Welcome to the amazing World AIDS Day showcase of, well, so many people coming on and talking about such a vital subject that needs to be talked about still to this day. Not only recognising the history surrounding AIDS and the HIV pandemic, but also the importance of continuing to educate individuals. Joining me as my wonderful co-host this evening is none other than our amazing youth ambassador. It is the incredible Dara. Hello, Dara.
Hi, Stephen.
Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. So, Dara, obviously LGBTQ plus and being young, is it all hip and trendy and swish like they make it out to be, or actually are there things that we still need to do and challenge to this day here in the UK?
I mean, you get a lot of people who are very inclusive and do actually understand that it's such a big issue with homophobia. And then there's that one person or that one group of people who still just don't get the effect it's going to have on other people. And that's what, personally, that's worrying, because I see a lot of people who already have it bad at home, then get it worse at school, whether that be because they're trans or just because they're gay. It is horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of hate thrown towards individuals where people don't necessarily understand specific things. So, you know, if you're in the lesbian box, then it's understood, you're kind of left alone. If you're in the gay box, it's understood, you're left alone. But if you're bi, we've got to talk about it. We've got to have a bit of a question.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trans, well, we're going to have to, get on your back. Is it really like that?
Well, some of my friends obviously are trans, and I get people from school who I already know just don't like me already, or they don't like me because of my sexuality. And then they'll come and they'll be like, is it true that this is their name, or is it true that they've changed their name to this? And I'm here like, that's not my place to tell you, and two, I know for a fact that they're not going to want you to know, of all people.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's one of those things that people take some time to understand about themselves, because this isn't a life choice. We've got to remember that this is something that individual truly is. That is how they feel, and that is how they want to live. And of course, who is anybody else to tell them otherwise? Dara, in terms of young LGBT individuals, do you think things around, say, HIV and AIDS are educated in the right way, or do you think potentially things need to change to make it easier to understand?
I think personally, it's just the teachers in the schools are so scared that they're going to offend someone that they just tread so lightly about it. I mean, I get told, my class gets told about how, if you say, oh, that's so gay in a negative light, it's not exactly great. But we never have actually looked at the AIDS pandemic and the stigma that came from that, and it's just, we learn about it as this is a disease, this is what it did. We never actually look at the effect it had on people and what it actually had the effect on for certain groups of people, which I think is just so important for it to be shared. And for it to be
this year, if we compared it to, say, COVID-19, right, the emotional mental health aspect of COVID-19, to those we've lost, to those that have struggled and now continue to have health struggles, those impacts are going to continue on for the rest and remaining of our lives. So go back those years to the HIV and AIDS crisis. The impact on specific target groups and individuals must have been even more so, because actually people's perceptions were it's the lesbians and the gays, well, more so the gays, that are responsible for this. What are your thoughts there? I mean, obviously, would you say that there's some kind of comparison between the two?
I would talk about how the fact that there's actually a greater understanding with mental health through the pandemic. Like, people understand that there needs to be a mental health barrier with this. Like, at my school, we actually have a group that comes in throughout the week and talks to different bubbles and helps people who are known to have mental health issues and are known to like panic through this kind of situation, whether it be due to the stress or the anxiety or the being alone and isolated. We've got people who we know we can go talk to and we feel confident talking to. I doubt people had that during HIV and AIDS. Obviously, I don't know because I wasn't around that then.
But I think because of the fact that people didn't generally understand it, and there was this whole, gosh, people thinking and believing that they could get it from a toilet seat and all sorts of random myths, that actually it was a lot harder, a lot more difficult to deliver the mental health support and things that we see now through COVID-19. So yeah, you've got a fair point there. Unfortunately, obviously, as you know, there was a quite horrific advertising campaign that kind of took part through that period of time in history. Let's have a look at that, and then we'll come back to talk about it.
There is now danger that has become a threat to us all. It is a deadly disease and there is no known cure. The virus can be passed during sexual intercourse with an infected person. Anyone can get it, man or woman. So far, it's been confined to small groups, but it's spreading. So protect yourself. And read this leaflet when it arrives. If you ignore AIDS, it could be the death of you. So don't die of ignorance.
That was a public information film.
I mean, watching that now scares the living daylights out of me. So I can only imagine what people were believing back then. Dara, obviously, we have to talk about that. I mean, what are your views on that? That is quite a scary advertisement, right?
I think it's just the fact that it was so dark and it starts with an explosion, that it immediately gives you this idea of this is going to kill everybody. You're not safe. And it's the amount of fear that you immediately get from that beginning of it. That's just...
Well, this is it exactly, and then the fact that there's these rumor mills starting that, gays are responsible for it. It's that that is the reason, and this is why it's so prevalent. But that said, do you think, right, and here's a question for you, if Boris Johnson played an advertisement like that now for COVID-19 and said, stay at home or you're going to be dead, do you think people would have taken lockdown a bit more seriously?
I think personally they would have, because there are a lot of people who didn't understand how severe it was and how quickly coronavirus is spreading, even now.
I mean, obviously, we can't compare, we must stress here, we cannot compare the HIV and AIDS crisis that is still to this day to COVID-19. They're very, very different, and we do have to talk about that. But of course, I'm just pointing out that actually back then, because of the lack of understanding, maybe that was their way of kind of fearing, creating that fear to then stop us from spreading it back then, because they didn't understand it. Maybe. Who knows? We'll never get into the mindsets of those individuals, but it's a shocking advertisement nonetheless, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, just even looking at it now, I can't even imagine turning on my TV and seeing a public service announcement like that.
Yeah.
TV, and we're going to be going over to some people in a short while just to find out what their views are. Dara, in terms of education then, obviously we touched upon the fact that teachers sometimes could pussyfoot around the subject rather than get straight talking and to the point. But sex is something that youngsters have, people that are of age have, and onwards. Why is it important that teachers learn maybe a tactic or a way of delivering sex education that includes HIV and AIDS that potentially means that they're not pussyfooting around it, and they actually get to the point and give you the vital information that will potentially and could potentially save somebody's life.
I think it's just important, especially when they talk about you need to make sure you know if someone has a disease. I think they should have been more specific, because obviously we know that some stuff there isn't a cure for and it won't go away, but we also know that that stuff won't kill you. I've never actually had a PSHE lesson where they've directly gone, this AIDS is a thing, it will kill you. There's no cure. There's no getting away from it. You need to make sure that people know whether or not they have this disease, because it would save your life.
But of course, you know, we do have to recognise, you know, this is kind of last phase of HIV, and obviously HIV can be prevented using medication and obviously contraceptive. So we do have to remember that. And we also have to remember that somebody living with HIV can go on to live a very healthy and normal life through medication that is available. And we're, you know, very, very lucky to be in that position. We also do have to unfortunately recognise that many countries worldwide, third world, don't have that medication access to contraceptive, or they have significant issues with things like rape in their country, which continually spread the infection of HIV. So yeah, we do have to call that out. PrEP, has anyone sat down with you at school or in education and said, this is PrEP and this is what it does? Just a good test. The PrEP is basically a medication that means that somebody that is sexually active won't be able to catch the HIV disease because they're on PrEP, and it stops the spread of the HIV infection. So I'm really surprised, but actually I speak to so many people that actually, when I look at the educational system, it's not educated, and they're not actually allowed to talk about it. They can talk about sex and contraceptive to stop you from having a baby, but they can't talk about sex to stop you from getting something potentially that could, you know, risk your health and your life. So that's something I think, you know, we'll continue to campaign. Dara, talk to me about then education. What do you think are the top 3 things then, talking, you know, whilst we've been talking about this, that people can change, or that can change in the educational system, or potentially people can learn from?
I think getting people who've experienced it from a certain group, so having someone who was part of the LGBTQ plus community during the spreading of the AIDS virus, so then people actually realize how terrifying it was and what kind of effect the stigma would have on people. Talking obviously about PrEP, because I've not known about that literally up until right now. And then just actually looking at the effect it has on certain types of people, not even just with the virus, just with how you speak to people. You know, because I get stuff at school, it's dealt with, but I know that some people aren't so lucky to have that at schools. And definitely. I know that they can just get so scared to actually tell a person because they don't have a teacher they feel like they can trust.
So when somebody is, I'm now pussyfooting around, but you know, when somebody is sexually active, what is taught to you as somebody that's at school to say, okay, if you've had sex that's unprotected, here's what you have to do? Has anyone had that conversation in school? I'm not talking about outside school, but inside school. Has anyone ever had that conversation with you?
Yeah, I'd say, I think it was year 9, we were actually told, if you find out you've obviously had sex with someone who has tested positive for any disease, this is where you can go to, this is the building you go to at the local hospital, and the NHS will test you for free, you'll be fine. It's just important that you go and test it, and they could not stress how important it was.
So that's good. You know, that's good to hear. I think we've got a guest that we can bring into the conversation. I know very, very opinionated when it comes to the advert, but we've been having a good conversation here. Do you want to, Dara, introduce our guest?
Okay. So this is my mum, one of probably the bravest people I do know, and has always been able to support anybody. Lisa Finan Cook.
Hello, Dara.
It's so cute, isn't it? In between you both now. But what a lovely
Oh,
introduction, I've got to say.
I know. I didn't even pay her for that.
That's one way of getting extra pocket money, that's for sure.
I don't know. Oh,
Obviously,
sweetie.
you know, Dara was talking there about not knowing about PrEP, for instance, from school, which was quite shocking. But actually, in fairness, maybe is that too much information? Does that then encourage unsafe sex? Who knows? But what are your views? Obviously, we've played the advert now, Lisa. Obviously, that was a shocking advertisement, and we had a conversation just now around, okay, if Boris Johnson played an advert for like that for COVID, will people have taken lockdown more seriously?
Would we all be wearing our masks when we should? Yeah,
what's your view?
I don't know. I mean, that advertising campaign, I was about, I think I was about 10 years old when that came out. And I can remember my mother very hurriedly turning it off the television if it came on when we were there. I can also remember overhearing conversations about it. It was quite a talking point. And obviously, I grew up in Ireland, which, you know, it was perhaps a little bit more conservative even than the UK at the time. And I told Dara earlier that it was actually that ad that triggered my mum's absolute aversion to using a public loo. Like, she was terrified by those ads. And then in turn, so was I. But did it work? I don't know. I mean, what are your views? Did it work at the time?
It's hard, I think, because of the fact that people had this stigma associated to gay men at the same time as that advert going out. It had a negative effect on the LGBT community, when actually the virus didn't start within the LGBT community. It just so happens that because of the fact that the sexual health system back then educated you more on wearing a condom as a straight heterosexual couple to avoid pregnancies, the straight heterosexual couples were having sex with condoms, and the gay men, because it wasn't educated that actually you could get something like this, were having unprotected sex because they didn't have to worry about having babies. And I think that's my view. I mean, I don't know, and please do not quote me on that, but that's the way my mind is thinking at the moment. Maybe it had a really negative impact on the way that gay men were viewed back then, but at the same time, because of lack of education, people just genuinely didn't know.
No. And I think at that time, you know, there was such a long period of time where nobody really understood where this virus was coming from. And so I guess they had to deliver that message somehow. But I think the unfortunate consequence of that is the overall negative impact, and how that contributed to the stereotypical view of the gay community. And that's a really unfortunate byproduct. And I think we ended up having to fight that for years and years and years. And I think when you speak to some of the people who worked sort of in the AIDS clinics and stuff at the time, and worked with people who had HIV and AIDS, the absolute horrific time that those people had in terms of how they were treated in hospitals, and you know, in general throughout the time that they had, it's horrific, you know, and we wouldn't nowadays, thank goodness, treat anybody in such a way at all. But yeah, it was a shocking campaign, and whilst it might have raised the profile of the virus, I think overall the impact has been quite negative. But I think, you know, just to turn it into a positive, we have made such progress, haven't we, in the decades that have come to pass since then. And I think when we spoke to Peter Tatchell the other day, just to do a little bit of a name drop, and I think as part of our programming we'll see the interview with him, and he had some very interesting things to say about that time as well. But the progress we've made in terms of the use of PrEP and the rollout of that, and that we, you know, have undetectable status now, which is fantastic. I think we need to really work to encourage people to continue to get tested, know your status, and don't be afraid of it, because whatever you might feel about it, there's wonderful support now and the treatment to manage HIV is there. And it's worth doing that. It's worth taking that step and being brave, and accepting the support that's there.
Definitely. And well, let's just go through the stats. The most recent estimate suggests that there were 105,000 individuals living with HIV in the UK in 2019. Of those, around 6,600 are potentially undiagnosed, so they don't know that they are HIV positive. London continues to have the highest rates of HIV in the country, with 36% of new diagnoses in 2019, them being in and amongst London residents, and 38% of people seen for HIV care were obviously living in London. Anyone can get HIV, and that's the misconception. People still believe to this day that gay people that get HIV and that's it. Anybody can get it, from groups or parts of the world that potentially people are more likely to be infected are those places that are third world countries that people don't potentially have access to contraception and medications. Of the 4,139 people diagnosed with HIV in the UK in 2019, 41% of those were gay or bisexual men. So quite an interesting stat.
Yeah,
Dara,
absolutely.
What do you make of it? Obviously, I know that you've recently been asking questions from NHS around dental dams for sexual health amongst lesbian women. Do you think more can be done by the NHS and Public Health England to put pressure on the educational system to make it easier to understand?
I think definitely. It's just the fact that that education needs to be spread, because obviously you can't just separate the class into, okay, who's gay and who's straight, and then we'll teach you what you need to know, because obviously you could have people who come out later on in their life, or you could have people who don't want to come out at schools and they don't feel safe coming out. It needs to be something that's taught to an entire class, not just split in two.
Definitely. And in terms of education, Lisa, as a parent, at what age, I mean, this, because I would never understand this, but at what age is it right to then educate a youngster on sex amongst relationships? Because at the moment they've changed the educational system to call it relationship education, to include lesbian and gay relationships. They don't necessarily touch upon trans, non-binary, intersex issues, which should most definitely be things that are educated on. But what are your views in terms of age? When is it appropriate? What's appropriate? Because obviously I would be open.
Yeah, you know, it's actually a really, really tricky question, that, because I think children and young people reach the point of curiosity at different stages. So you've got to catch them, you know, when the youngest ones are at that stage. And Dara, I don't think you'll mind me saying, but you and your sister, I think it's because we're a very open household here, and we talk about these issues a lot. They have known how to be safe from quite a young age. And I think that school starts, did you say year 9, Dara, when you sort of get proper sort of sexual health education?
We get told about contraception and why it's needed at year 7, but we've never actually been told where we can go to get tested, or where we can go to get the medication we need.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, so that's coming from Dara, who goes. Sorry, Dara, for cutting across you. That comes from a young person who goes to a school that's very, very progressive. And we've had many conversations with Dara's head teacher and some of her teachers as well about how they handle sex education for LGBTQ young people, because obviously we have a vested interest in that. They are excellent there, but I know that her school is an exception. So and I still feel that Dara's school could go further, you know, with the education that they offer. So it does leave me wondering what happens in other schools, and it would be an interesting conversation to have with some representatives from the schools, just to see how they're handling it. And I think the key is, and I think you know, we know this from the conference that you were involved in last year, it is about equipping teachers with the skills to deliver this education. You know, it's not an easy thing for people to talk about a lot of the time. And you know, with the best will in the world, you can only do it if you are properly equipped and know what you're talking about, and are confident in handling it as well. You know, particularly, I think a lot of people worry about saying the wrong thing about LGBTQ young people and the community as a whole. We worry so much less about that, it has to be said. You know, we would just be so happy if they were delivering comprehensive sexual health education in our schools. And I think Dara is absolutely right. Everybody needs to know about LGBTQ sex and how to stay safe in that, because you're quite right, Dara. People may not feel safe joining the gay club in school, and may come out of it late in life, like me, you know, and that's just the way it is. So it's important that we all understand how to stay safe, and exactly that, how to access testing and the importance of doing that. And to just break down the stigma around it all. It's okay to talk about sex, and it's okay to talk about how to stay safe. It's okay to talk about what happens if you haven't always been safe and what you can do about that. And we need to just continue to educate and get that message out.
It must have been such a crazy and very worrying time for so many individuals. And unfortunately, we do have to remember thousands upon thousands of people that were lost to HIV and AIDS, and are still lost to HIV and AIDS. But Dara, why is it so important that we continue to talk about that? And why is it so important that we continue to have World AIDS Day?
Just have the awareness that this disease is still around. It's obviously not gone. It's probably not going to be going anywhere if we're not getting that education out and we're not getting the awareness out, and even with the remembrance of it. And it's also the fact that it wasn't only gay people who got the virus. It was anyone could get it.
Exactly that. And we've got to recognise that statistic. I'm just going to call that statistic out one more time. 41% of those diagnosed with HIV in the UK in 2019 were gay or bisexual men. Okay, so the stigma attached is that, you know, majority are gay, bisexual men. The fact is, the majority aren't, and there are a significant number of, you know, individuals that are in straight heterosexual relationships that in the UK, and this is a UK stat, it's not the worldwide stat, that are contracting this virus. And of course, it's really important that we continue to share our experience as an LGBTQ plus community with those individuals to say, look, you know, this is here. Because actually the fear is, worrying for me is that, yes, okay, we're educating the LGBTQ plus community there, etc. But if it's not being taught in schools, and those, if there's not like a straight club or straight groups of places where people go to, like LGBT, you know, people that are looking for LGBT will come to Pride in Surrey and we'll educate. But as a straight individual, if we're not educating those youngsters, who is going to end up educating them in years to come? And that's my fear. Lisa, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think youth clubs do. I'm an ex-youth worker, so I think that youth clubs do quite successfully fill the gap there. But of course, very few young people actually access youth clubs these days. You know, it's not like it used to be, where, you know, everybody would go on a Friday evening to the local youthy. You know, it's not like that. And funding has been cut for youth work, and so really they're working with targeted groups. They're working with really small groups of young people for the most part, and so we're only, you know, tipping the surface there. So again, it does go back to catching them all at school level, doesn't it? You know, that's where it needs to be, and that's why we need to continue to lobby our local councils, our county councils, our MPs, and anybody who can influence that, because it's really, really, really important that the resources are given to schools to deliver comprehensive sexual health education to all our young people.
So very important. Thank you very much. Lisa, before I let you go then, any closing words from you? Because we are coming to the end of this piece. And of course, we do want to let Dara say her last little few words. Anything from you?
Nothing from me. Just on World AIDS Day, I just think that it's very important that we remember the people that we've lost. And we recognise the progress that's been made, but there was a lot of suffering. A lot of lives were lost over a long period of time, and they continue to be lost globally. So there's a lot of work to be done. And this World AIDS Day at Pride in Surrey, we remember and we cherish, and we continue to stand with the whole community today and every day.
Thank you, Lisa. Much appreciated and always a pleasure. Right, Dara, then, this is your magical moment, so to speak. I know that you've always got something amazing to say, but I'm going to hand over to you now just to really close off the show and let people hear what you have to say with regards to World AIDS Day. But before we do go, we will obviously quickly remind people of the services that are available here in Surrey, and they are through the NHS CNWL service. To find out more information, simply search on Google NHS CNWL, or alternatively, if you didn't catch that, or if you want to talk about anything else, you can text TALK to a very special number. Dara, what's that number?
88440.
That's right. Text TALK to 88440. Text are charged at your standard rate. Please ask permission from the bill payer before you do so. Just a reminder that you are not alone. And of course, if any of the things that we've spoke about on today's show or throughout the World AIDS Day shows that have been put on for you today, please do get in contact with us, because we can connect you with the support that's available. Over to the incredible then, Dara, who is going to close off today's show with just a few words. Thank you, Dara. Over to you.
Well, obviously, for part of the gay community, don't be scared to go and ask for help. Don't be scared to talk to people, and be proud of who you are. And if you're straight, make sure you're seen as an ally, and make sure that you're going to support people, not just when it's a Pride event or it's Pride Month. You need to do it the whole year round, and you need to do it for everyone. Not just go, oh, I'm only going to support you because you're my friend and no one else. I'm going to be rude to everyone else. You shouldn't do that. Just be there for anyone who needs it. Bye, everyone.